We think of the heart as this master regulator sitting in the chest, looking at the body and deciding, okay, everyone, listen up. I'm setting the pace today. You all just try to keep up.
Right, the commander-in-chief of our own physiology. It's a very powerful, very romantic notion.
It is. But then I started looking at the stack of research we have on the desk today, specifically Chapter 20 from that massive physiology text we've been wading through.
Ah, yes, that one.
And that entire cultural narrative is completely, utterly backward.
It is. In fact, if you walk away with one single paradigm shift from this deep dive, it should be this. The heart is not the master.
What is it then?
It's a servant.
A servant? That feels, I don't know, like a bit of demotion for the most vital organ in the body.
I like to think of it as a promotion to essential logistics manager.
Yeah.
But yes, biologically, physically, it's a servant. It does not dictate the flow.
It just reacts to it.
It reacts. It pumps exactly what the body sends it. If your muscles scream, we need more, they send more blood back. And the heart, well, it just deals with it. It's this loyal, hardworking employee that never clocks out, never complains.
It just manages whatever workload arrives at the loading dock.
Precisely.
That is a fundamental flip. So today, that's what we're going to explore. We are doing a deep dive into cardiac output, venous return, and the really complex, fascinating regulation that ties them together.
It's a beautiful system.
It is, but I have to be honest with you and with you listening. When I first opened the source material for this episode, I thought, okay, pumping blood, in, out, how hard can it be? It's just plumbing.
And then you turned the page and saw the graphs.
I saw the graphs. I saw curves intersecting other curves. I saw terms like mean systemic filling pressure. I saw equations that looked like something out of an advanced engineering manual. This isn't just plumbing, is it?
No.
This is the black diamond run of physiology.
It is a bit of a slope, yes.
Yeah.
It's one of the most quantitative and conceptual chapters in the whole book.
Yeah.
But that's our mission today. We're going to decode that mechanical and mathematical relationship. We have to.
We have to understand the balance.
The balance between what leaves the heart cardiac output and what comes back venous return. Because as we'll see, you simply cannot understand one without the other.
They're two sides of the same coin.
The exact same coin. It's a closed loop.
You can't pump what you don't have.
You can't. And understanding how that loop regulates itself is, I would argue, the most important concept in understanding how we stay alive from moment to moment.
All right, let's gear up. We need to lay some ground rules before we start, drawing curves in our minds. We have two main characters in this story. Let's get the definitions locked down so we're all speaking the same language. Give us the technical breakdown.
Okay, let's start with the output side. Cardiac output, often abbreviated as COO.
CO.
Got it. Simply put, this is the quantity of blood pumped into the aorta each minute. It's the outflow from the left side of the heart to the rest of the body.
Okay, straightforward enough. And the other side of the coin?
That's venous return. The quantity of blood flowing from the veins into the right atrium each minute, it's the inflow.
So outflow and inflow.
And here is the golden rule, the foundational concept of this entire deep dive. Cardiac output and venous return must be equal.
They have to be the exact same number. Not close, but exact.
They have to. The system is a closed circle. You can't pump out blood you haven't received. Now, to be super precise, for a few heartbeats, a tiny amount of blood might get stored in the lungs or the heart chambers or drained from them.
But over any real amount of time...
Even just a few seconds. Output equals return, period.
Right, because if output was higher than return for even a few minutes, you'd pump your veins dry and your arteries would burst.
And if return was higher than output, your heart would, it would explode like an overfilled water balloon.
So equilibrium is the name of the game, a constant balancing act.
Exactly.
So if I pump 5 liters out, 5 liters better be coming back. And speaking of 5 liters, let's talk baselines. We need a reference point. What is normal for a human being just, sitting here?
Good question. If we look at the data for a young, healthy man at rest, the average cardiac output is about 5.6 liters per minute.
5.6.
For women, it's statistically a little bit lower, around 4.9 liters per minute.
5.6 liters. I'm trying to visualize that. That's like 3 of those big 2-liter soda bottles moving through your chest every single minute.
It is.
That is a lot of fluid dynamics, especially considering you're just sitting there.
It is a tremendous amount of work. Your heart is moving that volume continuously, something like 100,000 times a day.
But that raw number 5.6 liters, that's a bit of a trap, isn't it? It doesn't tell the whole story.
It doesn't. Not at all. Because bodies vary wildly.
Right. If I'm a 7-foot-tall basketball player, 5.6 liters might mean I'm about to faint because my brain isn't getting enough.
And if you're a much smaller person, 5.6 liters might mean you're in a state of overload. One size does not fit all.
So how do we account for that?
Well, body size is a huge variable. A larger body just has more tissue, more mitochondria, more surface area to heat or cool. It just has more metabolism. It requires more flow.
So physiologists came up with a way to normalize it,
Exactly. It's called the cardiac index.
which is the output adjusted for your size.
Precisely. It's the cardiac output per square meter of body surface area. A standard 70-kilogram person, our sort of reference human in the textbooks, has a surface area of about 1.7 square meters.
Okay.
So if you do the math, 5.6 liters divided by 1.7. The average cardiac index for adults comes out to about 3 liters per minute per square meter.
And that levels the playing field. It lets us compare the jockey and the basketball player and see if their hearts are actually performing appropriately for their individual bodies.
Correct. It normalizes all the data so you can make meaningful comparisons.
Now, speaking of data, there was a chart in the source material figure 20:1, for those imagining the page, that really caught my eye. It plots this cardiac index against age.
Mm-hmm.
And honestly, it didn't look like what I expected at all.
What stood out to you?
Well, usually with physical performance, you assume the peak is in your 20s or maybe early 30s, when athletes are in their prime, when we're at our strongest.
Right.
But this curve, it peaks at age 10. A 10-year-old kid has a cardiac index over 4 liters per minute per square meter, and then it just steadily drops your whole life until you're 80, where it's down to like 2.4. Why are 10-year-olds running so hot?
It's a fascinating insight, isn't it? And the answer comes down to one word: metabolism.
Okay.
Remember our golden rule. The heart is a servant to the tissues. What is a 10-year-old doing biologically?
Growing, running around like a maniac, burning insane amounts of energy.
Mostly growing. A rapidly growing child has an incredibly high metabolic turnover. Their tissues are literally constructing a larger human being from raw materials.
They're a biological construction site.
Exactly. They are screaming for oxygen and nutrients to build bone, build muscle, synthesize proteins. So the heart pumps more to meet that demand.
So as we age, our growth stops.
And eventually, our metabolic activity naturally declines. Our muscle mass tends to shrink as we get elderly.
So the heart slows down because the body is just asking for less.
Precisely. The decline in that curve mirrors the decline in our overall metabolic activity. It's not necessarily that the heart is getting weaker in a vacuum. It's that the demand from the factory floor your body is decreasing.
The servant doesn't need to bring as many supplies because the factory isn't building as much product.
That makes perfect sense. It's demand-driven economics, but for blood.
That's a perfect way to put it.
And that's a perfect segue into our next big section, the control of cardiac output. We've established that the heart serves the body. But how? Who is actually driving this bus? Mechanically, how does the heart know, oh, more blood is coming, I should pump harder? It doesn't have eyes. It can't see the line at the loading dock.
So what's the mechanism?
The primary mechanism, and this is the absolute cornerstone of cardiac physiology, is called the Frank-Starling law of the heart.
Frank Starling. It sounds like a law firm or, I don't know, a detective agency. Frank and Starling, private eyes.
It does, doesn't it? It's named after Otto Frank and Ernest Starling, two physiologists from the late 19th and early 20th century. And the principle they discovered is just elegant in its simplicity.
Okay.
Imagine the heart muscle like a rubber band.
Okay, I'm visualizing a rubber band.
When blood flows into the heart, the venous return, it fills the chamber. That filling physically stretches the walls of the heart.
So more blood coming in equals more stretch.
Correct. And just like a rubber band, the more you stretch the heart muscle up to a certain physiological limit, of course, the more forcefully it snaps back.
Why, though? Is it just a simple elastic recoil?
It's a bit more complex, a bit more beautiful than just elasticity. When you stretch the muscle fibers, the tiny protein filaments inside the cells, the actin and myosin, they slide past each other.
Okay.
Stretching them actually aligns them into a more optimal position to grab onto each other and pull. It increases the number of cross bridges it can form.
So it's like an archer pulling back a bowstring.
That's a great analogy. The further back you pull, the more potential energy you store, and the harder the arrow, the blood, in this case, flies out.
That is incredible. So it's purely mechanical, no brain involved.
It's intrinsic. It happens even if you cut every single nerve to the heart. You can take a heart out of a body, keep it alive with fluids in a lab, and if you pour more fluid into the atrium, it will pump harder.
Wow.
If the veins dump an extra liter of blood into the right atrium, the heart stretches, contracts with significantly more force, and pumps that extra liter right out into the aorta.
It's an automatic overflow valve.
It is. The heart automatically pumps whatever comes in. It doesn't decide the volume. The veins do. This is the very essence of its role as a servant.
But the stretch does more than just make it pump harder, right?
Yeah.
I think I read something in the notes about the pacemaker stretch.
Yes. That's a secondary effect, but it's important. The sinus node, the natural pacemaker in the right atrium that sets the beat.
The thing that actually generates the electrical impulse.
Exactly. It's physically part of that atrial wall. So if you stretch the wall, you stretch the node.
And the node doesn't like being stretched?
Well, when that node is stretched, it becomes more excitable. Mechanically, it just causes the firing rate to increase. It starts firing faster.
So you get a double whammy. You get a harder contraction from the muscle fibers.
And a faster beat from the pacemaker.
A faster beat.
Exactly. It's the heart saying, we have a lot of cargo to move, let's speed up the conveyor belt.
And then, just to be sure, the message is received loud and clear, there is a third layer of control. The Bainbridge reflex.
The Bainbridge reflex. Yes. Now we are finally bringing the nervous system into play.
So the Frank Starling stuff is just the muscle doing its own thing.
Wow.
Cambridge involves the brain.
It involves the brain. When the right atrium stretches, it triggers specific nerve receptors embedded in the wall. These send signals up the vagus nerves to the medulla in the brainstem, specifically to the vasomotor center.
The brain's traffic control center for the circulatory system.
That's a good way to think of it. The brain gets the signal. Alert! The right atrium is distended. We are backing up.
And the brain's response.
It immediately sends a signal back down the sympathetic nerves to the heart to increase the heart rate even more.
So Frank Starling is the muscle reacting locally, and Bainbridge is the nervous system reacting to that exact same stretch. It's like a backup system.
Precisely. All of these mechanisms are designed to ensure one thing, that blood does not dam up in the veins. It has to keep moving forward. The heart cannot allow a traffic jam on the input side.
Okay, so if the heart is just reacting to flow, where is the flow coming from? I mean, what determines how much blood actually shows up at the door? If the heart is the servant, who is the customer making the orders?
This is the summation concept, and it's illustrated in figure 20-2 of your notes. It's a really fascinating way to look at the body. Cardiac output is regulated by the sum of all local tissue flows.
Meaning every organ orders its own lunch.
That's a great way to put it. It is a democracy of tissues. The brain might need 14% of the blood flow. The kidneys, which are incredibly greedy organs because they have to filter everything, they might want 22%. The muscles, depending on if you're sitting or running a marathon, they take their share.
So each tissue controls its own flow.
Based on its local metabolic needs.
So walk me through that. If my muscles are working hard, they are burning oxygen.
Right. They burn oxygen and they produce waste products like adenosine, carbon dioxide, lactate. These chemicals start to accumulate right there in the tissue.
And what do those chemicals do?
They act as powerful local signals. They act directly on the tiny blood vessels, the arterioles that feed that muscle, and they cause them to dilate, to widen.
Okay, so the pipe gets bigger.
The pipe gets bigger, the resistance in that pipe drops, and more blood flows in. It's simple plumbing. If you open the faucet wider, more water flows.
And since the system is a loop, that extra blood eventually flows through the muscle, into the veins, back to the heart. It stretches it via Frank Starling.
And the heart pumps it out. Exactly. The heart is just summing up all these individual demands. If the kidneys dilate and the muscles dilate and the gut dilates after a big meal, the total venous return increases. The heart responds and cardiac output goes up.
It really changes how you view the body. The heart isn't the boss. The heart is the logistics manager making sure everyone gets what they voted for.
Correct. The tissues vote with their resistance vessels, and the heart simply counts the votes by pumping the resulting volume.
But this brings us to the physics of it all. Because you can't talk about flow in pipes without talking about pressure and resistance. There's a formula here that kept popping up in the reading, Ohm's law of circulation.
Yes. For anyone who remembers high school physics, Ohm's law is Vi dollar equals IR dollars. Voltage equals current times resistance.
I vaguely remember that.
In the body, it works the exact same way, we just use different terms.
Okay, break that translation down for us.
Cardiac output is the current, the flow of electrons, or in this case, blood. Arterial pressure is the voltage, that's the driving force. And total peripheral resistance is, well, the resistance, the friction, and all the pipes added together.
So the formula is cardiac output, arterial pressure, total peripheral resistance.
Right. Now here is the crucial insight that explains why the servant heart model works so perfectly. Under most normal conditions, our body keeps arterial pressure very, very constant.
Your blood pressure.
Your mean arterial pressure. The nervous system fights tooth and nail to keep it at a steady baseline, say 100 millimilli Hg.
Okay, so if pressure is a constant number in that equation,
Then, cardiac output is determined purely by the inverse of resistance. Mathematically, if pressure is fixed and total peripheral resistance drops, meaning all those little vessels dilate, cardiac output must go up. There's no other option.
this brings us to a really cool but slightly terrifying experiment mentioned in the text. It involves a drug called denatrophenol. This sounds like something you strictly do not want to take.
Definitely not. It's a metabolic poison, essentially.
Yeah.
What it does is it uncouples oxidative phosphorylation.
In English, please.
It makes your metabolism run wild without producing any useful energy. It creates a massive increase in metabolic rate, about 4 times normal.
So it tricks the tissues into thinking they are running a marathon while you are lying perfectly still?
Exactly. So what do the tissues do?
They scream for blood because they are burning through oxygen for no reason.
They scream. All the blood vessels in the body dilate massively to feed this fake metabolic need. Total peripheral resistance plummets.
And in the experiment figure 26, they looked at this with and without the nervous system involved.
Yes. First, they did it with the nervous system intact. The denatrophenol caused the vessels to dilate, but the nervous system sensed a potential pressure drop, and it kicked in hard to maintain blood pressure.
How?
It constricted other vessels. It stimulated the heart. So, with pressure held stable and resistance dropping low, what happens to output, according to Ohm's law?
It has to skyrocket.
It spiked massively to feed the tissues. The servant heart doing its job, responding to all the open faucets.
But then they did the dark version of the experiment. They blocked the nervous system.
They cut the wires. They blocked all the autonomic controls. Then they gave the denatrophenol.
The vessel still dilated.
They still dilated because that's a local chemical effect. The
Okay.
tissues were still screaming, but without the nervous system to tighten things up elsewhere or to stimulate the heart.
The arterial pressure crash.
It fell drastically. There was nothing holding it up.
And if pressure falls in the equation,
Cardiac output barely rose at all. The system completely failed.
that is a huge revelation. This proves that the nervous system isn't creating the flow. The tissues are creating the demand for flow, but the nervous system is the stabilizer.
Yes.
It maintains the pressure so that the flow can happen.
That's a perfect analogy. Think of your house. The city water authority doesn't decide when you wash your hands. You decide that by opening the tap in your bathroom.
Right.
But if the city doesn't maintain the pressure in the main line, it doesn't matter how much you turn the handle. Nothing comes out.
So the nervous system is the city water authority for the body.
Exactly. It maintains the mainline pressure so that when your kidney or your bicep decides to open its tap, blood actually flows.
That really clarifies the roles. The heart is the pump, the tissues are the faucets, and the nervous system regulates the pressure in the pipes.
You've got it.
All right, let's move from the ideal system to when things go wrong. Section 4, pathological states. We're talking high and low output. Now, based on what we just learned, if I see a patient with super high cardiac output, my first instinct would be to say, wow, their heart is super strong, they must be an athlete.
And paradoxically, you would almost certainly be wrong.
I figured. So a super heart doesn't cause high flow.
Very, very rarely. Abnormally high cardiac output is almost always caused by chronically low total peripheral resistance, not a superheart.
It's a resistance problem.
It is. Look at the list of conditions in the source material. Beriberi, AV fistula, hyperthyroidism, anemia, they all share one common feature. They reduce the resistance to blood flow.
Let's break those down. Beriberi, that's an old school disease, right? Vitamin deficiency.
Vitamin B1, thiamine. We don't see it much in the developed world now thanks to fortified foods, but it causes a diminished ability of the tissues to use nutrients. Basically, the metabolic machinery in the cells breaks down.
So the tissues are starving, even if there is plenty of food in the blood.
Exactly. And when tissues starve, what do?
They scream, they vasodilate.
Massively. Send more blood, we are hungry.
Mm.
The total peripheral resistance can drop by as much as 50%. So the servant heart responds to this massive return, and cardiac output can double. Not because the heart is strong, but because the peripheral resistance has collapsed.
Okay, what about an AV fistula? What's that?
That stands for arteriovenous fistula. It's a direct connection, a shortcut, between an artery and a vein completely bypassing the capillaries. This can happen from, say, a knife wound, or we sometimes create them surgically for dialysis patients.
It's like a short circuit in an electrical wire.
That's a perfect way to describe it. Blood usually has to squeeze through those tiny high-resistance capillaries. That's where most of the friction is.
Right.
If you drill a big hole connecting the high-pressure artery directly to the low-pressure vein, blood just roars through that hole. It's a path of least resistance. Resistance plummets, venous return skyrockets, output skyrockets.
And hyperthyroidism.
That's metabolism in overdrive. The thyroid hormone tells every cell in the body to work harder, burn more fuel. They use more oxygen, they produce more waste products.
Which causes them to vasodilate.
Widespread vasodilation leads to low resistance and high output.
And anemia. That's low red blood cells. How does that fit in?
Two things happen there. First is viscosity. Red blood cells are what make blood thick. If you have fewer of them, the blood is physically thinner. It's more like water instead of syrup. It just flows more easily.
So less friction in the pipes.
Less friction. And second, because there are fewer red blood cells carrying oxygen, the tissues aren't getting enough. So what do?
They vasodilate to try and compensate.
Correct. Both factors work together to drop resistance and increase output.
It's a clear theme. High output equals low resistance. Okay, let's look at the flip side. Low cardiac output.
This breaks down into two broad categories. Category 1, the pump itself fails. Category 2, the venous return fails.
The pump failure seems obvious. A heart attack, valve disease.
Right. Myocardial infarction, severe myocarditis, really bad valve issues. The heart is willing, but the muscle is weak or damaged. It physically cannot handle the load, even a normal one. The output drops because the engine is broken. This is what we call cardiogenic shock.
But the non-cardiac causes are interesting. When the return fails, the engine is fine, but the gas tank is empty.
This is where we see things like a massive hemorrhage. If you lose a lot of blood volume, you simply don't have enough fluid to fill the vessels. If the vessels aren't full, the pressure pushing blood back to the heart drops. Return drops, output drops.
Or this one, acute venous dilation.
That's what happens when someone faints.
Yeah.
Or during spinal anesthesia. The sympathetic nervous system basically disconnects for a moment.
Okay.
Normally, your veins have a little bit of tone. They're slightly tightened by the nervous system. If you lose that tone, they just relax and expand.
They become big, floppy storage bags.
Exactly. The blood just pools in your legs and your gut. It's physically all there. You haven't lost any blood, but it's not getting back to the heart. It's stuck out on the periphery.
So the heart is pumping empty, essentially.
It's pumping empty. There's no return.
All right, we've covered the concepts. Now we have to climb the mountain. We have to look at the quantitative analysis, the curves. This is where the source material went from biology to calculus.
This is the heart of the chapter, pun intended. To truly understand this, we have to stop thinking in sentences and start thinking in graphs. We need to visualize two curves simultaneously, the cardiac output curve and the venous return curve.
Let's start with the cardiac output curve. This is figure 20-5 for anyone following along at home.
Okay, imagine a graph. The x-axis, the horizontal one, is right atrial pressure. That's the pressure inside the input chamber of the heart.
Okay.
The y-axis, the vertical one, is cardiac output, the flow leaving the heart.
So X is input pressure, Y is output flow.
Right. So as you move to the right on the x-axis, as pressure in the atrium rises, it stretches the heart. Now, what does the Frank-Starling law say happens?
More stretch, more pump, output goes up.
Right. So the curve goes up steeply. It starts near zero, shoots up, but it doesn't go up forever. Eventually, the heart is stretched as much as it can possibly stretch. The muscle fibers can't optimize any further.
So the curve flattens out, it hits a plateau.
It reaches a plateau.
Where is that plateau for a normal, healthy heart at rest?
About 13 liters per minute.
Wait, pause there. We said normal resting flow is around 5 liters per minute. The plateau is at 13.
Yes, that is your cardiac reserve. Your heart is capable of pumping 2.5 times your resting needs without any special stimulation from the brain. It's just built in, over-engineered for safety and for exertion.
That's impressive. It's like having a car that can do 150 miles an hour even though you only ever drive 60.
That's a good way to put it. But that curve isn't set in stone, right? It can shift up or down.
It can. We call it a hyper-effective heart if the curve shifts up.
What causes that?
This happens with nervous excitation, the sympathetic system whipping the horses, or with hypertrophy, like in a marathon runner whose heart muscle has grown stronger. A top athlete's heart can plateau at 30 or even 40 liters per minute. That is just an absurd volume of flow. That's a fire hose.
It is. And then there is the hypoeffective heart. The curve shifts down.
So things like hypertension, a heart attack, valvular disease.
Exactly.
Yeah.
The plateau drops. Maybe the maximum it can pump is only 5 or 6 liters per minute.
Which means they are fine just sitting at rest.
But if they try to walk up a flight of stairs,
They hit their ceiling immediately, they max out their curve, there's no reserve.
no reserve at all.
Now, there's a section on external pressure, figure 22.8. This blew my mind a bit. The curve is based on pressure inside the heart versus outside the heart.
Correct. The heart lives in a box, the chest cavity, the thorax. And usually the pressure in that box is slightly negative, about manacle 4 millimole HE,
Why negative?
because the lungs are always trying to collapse, but the rib cage holds them open. It creates a slight vacuum, which actually helps pull the heart open and aids filling.
But if that external pressure changes...
The entire curve shifts. Take cardiac tamponade. This is a huge medical emergency where fluid, usually blood from a rupture, fills the pericardial sac, the little bag around the heart.
So the heart is being crushed from the outside.
It's being pressurized. To fill that heart, the venous blood has to push harder than that external fluid pressure. This shifts the entire cardiac output curve way over to the right. You need a much higher right atrial pressure just to get a normal flow.
So the heart muscle itself isn't necessarily weaker, it's just fighting this massive headwind.
Exactly. The same thing happens with positive pressure breathing, like with a ventilator. If you inflate the lungs with high pressure, it squeezes the heart, shifting the curve to the right.
Okay, that's the output curve. That's the heart's capacity. Now we have to face the boss level, the venous return curve. Figure 2010.
This is pretty unique to this field of physiology, isn't it? It is. It was developed largely by Arthur Guyton, the author of this very textbook. And it's often misunderstood because the slope goes the wrong way.
Okay.
We are plotting the same axis, right? Atrial pressure on the x-axis, venous return on the y-axis, but the slope goes down.
It goes down. Wait, why? That feels backward.
Think about it. Blood flows from high pressure to low pressure, right?
Right.
The blood is trying to get from the veins into the right atrium. If the pressure in the right atrium, the destination goes up,
then the pressure difference is smaller. It's like a back pressure.
Exactly. As right atrial pressure rises, it fights the return of blood. The gradient gets smaller and smaller, and if the pressure in the atrium gets high enough, the flow stops completely.
And what is that magic number where the flow stops?
That is the single most important number on this graph. It's called the mean systemic filling pressure, or PIS. In a normal human, it's about 7 millimole Hg.
Wait, only 7? That seems incredibly low. I mean, arterial pressure is like 100.
It is low. That is the pressure that exists everywhere in the circulation. If you could magically stop the heart for a second and let it all even out. It's the intrinsic pressure in the tank caused by the blood volume stretching the vessel walls. It's the driving force of the return.
So if the pressure in the heart hits 7, it equals the push from the veins. 7 versus 7, no gradient.
No gradient, flow is 0.
So that point on the graph where the curve hits the x-axis, that's the...
Correct. That is your anchor point. If you want more flow, you have to lower the right atrial pressure below 7 millimole Hg to create that gradient.
Okay, so let's look at the other end of the curve. What happens if right atrial pressure drops below 0 into the negative numbers?
Well, logic would suggest that flow should keep increasing. The suction is stronger.
But the graph shows a plateau, a perfectly flat plateau.
It does?
Why? Why doesn't negative pressure suck even more blood into the chest?
Because veins are floppy tubes. They aren't rigid pipes like arteries. If you apply a strong negative suction to a floppy tube, what happens?
It collapses, like a McDonald's straw if you suck too hard on a thick milkshake.
Exactly. The big veins entering the chest just collapse. The negative pressure sucks their walls together. So you can't increase flow any further. That's why we have a maximum limit on venous return caused by this collapse.
So we have a curve that slopes down from a plateau on the left, and it crosses the axis at 7 millimole Hg on the right.
You've got it. Now, just like the output curve, this return curve can change.
It's not static.
No, it relies on 3 factors. Right? Atrial pressure, which just moves you along the curve.
Right.
I mean, systemic filling pressure, the SIF, and the resistance to venous return.
Okay, let's talk about changing SIF. That was figure 2011.
Imagine we hook you up to a blood transfusion and we pump in an extra liter of blood. What happens to the pressure inside all your veins?
It's got to go up. You've added more fluid to the same container, the vessels stretch.
Right. Your SIF rises from 7 to, say, 14 millimole Hg. This shifts the entire venous return curve up and to the right.
Meaning that at any given heart pressure, more blood is flowing back in.
Yes. You have a stronger push from the periphery. The exact same thing happens with sympathetic stimulation. The nerves clamp down on the veins, tightening the container. Pressure rises, PRES rises, the curve shifts up.
So more volume and tightening the veins both boost the return pressure. What about resistance? That was figure 2013.
This changes the slope of the curve. If resistance in the veins increases, say there's an obstruction, it's just harder for blood to flow.
The pipe is narrower.
So the slope flattens out. Even if you have a good pressure gradient, the flow is sluggish.
And the text mentioned that venous resistance is the main driver here, not arterial.
Yes, mathematically, about 2/3 of the resistance to venous return actually comes from the veins themselves, not the arterioles.
Okay. We have the cardiac output curve, the heart's
Mhm.
ability to pump. We have the venous return curve, the body's supply of blood. Now comes the magic trick. Section 7, putting it all together. This is where Guyton's genius really shines.
The equilibrium point. You take these two graphs, the upward sloping heart curve and the downward sloping vein curve, and you overlay them on top of each other.
And where they cross.
That is the only point where the system can operate in a steady state. It is the single point where the heart is pumping out exactly what is coming in, and the atrium is at a stable pressure that allows for that flow. It satisfies both the biology of the heart and the physics of the veins at the exact same time.
In a normal person, that crossing point is at a right atrial pressure of a 0 mmHg and a flow of 5 liters per minute.
Exactly. Now let's run a simulation. This is like being a medical detective. Let's look at figure 2015. Let's say we instantly inject a large volume of blood into a patient.
Okay. We just said that more volume increases spare, so the venous return curve shifts to the right.
It shifts to the right. Now look at the new intersection point with the unchanged cardiac output curve.
The intersection is higher on the y-axis, so the output jumps up.
The immediate effect. Output jumps drastically, maybe to 10 or 12 liters a minute. The heart is handling the extra load thanks to Frank Starling. But that's not permanent. The body compensates.
How fast does it compensate?
Over the next 10 to 40 minutes, several things happen. First, the higher pressure in the capillaries pushes fluid out into the tissues. You get a little puffy. That lowers the blood volume.
Okay.
Second, the veins themselves experience something called stress relaxation. They just stretch out to accommodate the new volume, which lowers the pressure.
And third?
Autoregulation. The tissues say, whoa, this is way too much blood flow. We don't need this much oxygen. And they constrict their own arterioles,
Which increases resistance.
which flattens the venous return slope.
Yeah.
And all three of those things work together to bring the cardiac output back down to normal. It's a beautiful, dynamic system that fights to return to its baseline.
Okay, let's do another one. Sympathetic stimulation. Figure 2016. This is the fight-or-flight response. A bear jumps out of the woods.
This is a double effect. The sympathetic nerves hit the heart and the vessels at the exact same time.
So on the heart side.
The heart becomes hypereffective. It beats faster and harder. The cardiac output curve shifts UP.
And on the vessel side.
The nerves constrict the veins. Pace increases. The venous return curve shifts UP.
Both curves shift up, so the new intersection point is way, way up.
A massive increase in cardiac output. We are primed for action, ready to run from that bear.
Now, compare that to spinal anesthesia, which is sympathetic inhibition.
The exact opposite. The heart becomes hypoeffective, so the CO curve shifts down. The veins relax, so the VR curve shifts down.
The whole system just sags.
The intersection point crashes. Output can fall to like 60% of normal. This is why maintaining blood pressure during anesthesia is so critical. The system loses all its tension.
Now, the most fascinating simulation in the whole text for me was the AV fistula, figure 2017, because it involves a rotation, not just a shift.
This is geometry in action. You open a fistula, a trap door in the circulation. Suddenly, resistance for a large part of the flow drops to almost zero.
So the slope of the venous return curve.
It rotates upward. It becomes incredibly steep. Blood just rushes back to the heart effortlessly.
So output jumps immediately.
From 5 to 13 liters per minute instantly. But then, over the next few weeks, something else happens. The kidneys sense that the blood pressure is a bit unstable, so they start to retain salt and water.
Which increases the blood volume.
And that shifts the whole rotated curve even further to the right.
So the patient ends up with a chronic, super high cardiac output of maybe 20 liters per minute.
Exactly. The heart is working overtime, permanently.
That sounds absolutely exhausting for the heart.
It is. Eventually, it leads to high-output heart failure. The servant literally works itself to death trying to clear the massive amount of return that keeps coming back.
Incredible. We've covered the theory. Quickly in Section 8, how do we actually measure this in a living person? I can't exactly stick a flow meter inside someone's aorta easily.
Well, in animal research, we can. We use electromagnetic or ultrasonic flow meters right on the aorta, and you can see the flow peak with every beat and then drop to zero in between.
But for humans, we need something less invasive,
The classic method is the Fick principle.
which uses oxygen as a sort of spy molecule.
Think of it this way. If you know how much oxygen the body picks up from the lungs each minute,
Okay, let's say it's 200 milliliters.
and you know how much oxygen is in the blood before it gets to the lungs, in the veins, and after it leaves the lungs, in the arteries.
The difference between those two is what each liter of blood picked up.
Exactly. Arterial blood has about 200 milliliters of oxygen per liter. Venous blood coming back from the body might have 160 milliliters, so the difference is 40 milliliters per liter.
Oh, so every liter of blood that passes through the lungs picks up 40 milliliters of oxygen.
And we know the total pickup was 200 milliliters for the whole minute. So if each liter grabs 40 milliliters, how many liters had to pass by to grab a total of 200 milliliters?
200 divided by 40, that's 5.
5 liters per minute. That's your cardiac output. It's just simple math using oxygen concentrations.
What about the dye method?
That's indicator dilution. You inject a known amount of dye into a big vein, then you put a sensor in an artery, and you monitor how concentrated the dye is as it passes by.
So if the dye passes by quickly and is very spread out, very dilute, that means there was a lot of flow.
Exactly. A high flow washes it out quickly. If the dye lingers and is very concentrated, the flow is slow. You plot the concentration over time, calculate the area under the curve, and that gives you your flow rate.
And modern tech.
Nowadays, we mostly use echocardiography. It's just ultrasound. We can literally see the heart beating and measure the size of the chambers and how much blood gets ejected with each stroke.
And just multiply that by the heart rate?
Precisely. Or there's impedance cardiography, which measures changes in electrical conductivity across the chest. Blood conducts electricity well, air in the lungs doesn't. You can track the volume changes in the heart beat by beat.
It's amazing how many clever ways we've found to measure the servant at work without ever having to open the chest.
It is. The principles are old, but the technology keeps getting better.
Okay, we have unpacked a lot. This has been a true deep dive. Let's bring it home. Summarize the big picture for us one more time.
If you take one thing away from all of this, it is the servant heart concept. The heart does not dictatorially set the flow.
The tissues do.
The peripheral tissues, your muscles, your brain, your gut, they dictate their own needs by dilating their blood vessels. This action is what controls the total venous return. The heart, through the elegant Frank Starling mechanism, simply pumps whatever comes back to it.
And the nervous system.
It's the unsung hero. It isn't generating the flow, but it's keeping the arterial pressure high enough so that the whole system can work efficiently. It's the stabilizer. This is the city water authority.
And everything comes down to that equilibrium point where those two curves cross.
The beautiful dynamic balance of volume, pressure, and resistance. It's happening in your chest right now, adjusting instantly, beat by beat, as you sit there listening to this.
Here's my final thought, something to chew on. We talked about that plateau, the fact that a normal resting heart can pump 13 liters a minute, but we only use 5.
The cardiac reserve.
Right. That's a massive reserve, 2.5 times what we need for basic survival. Why? Why did evolution build a pump that is 2.5 times stronger than necessary for just sitting around?
It's a good question.
I think it implies that extreme exertion running from a predator chasing down prey was just as central to our evolutionary design as resting survival. We aren't just built to exist. We are built for action. We are built to redline that engine.
That's a fascinating perspective. The servant is quiet most of the time, but it's ready for war at a moment's notice.
And on that note, we'll let your heart get back to its resting equilibrium. Thanks for listening to The Deep Dive.
Stay curious.